All right, good morning. It is June 2nd. Dr. Carr just reliably informed me. Online today for the OSU Turfgrass Team Times, we got Dr. Tyler Carr, Dr. David Gardner, Dr. David Shetlar, inimitable Pamela Sherratt, and a special guest coming in live, hot live from the AAA factory of Columbus Clippers, Mr. Wes Ganobcik. Up first this morning, Pamela Sherratt.
Good morning, everyone. I just have two quick things to talk about. Dr. Carr is going to talk about mowing during this stressful time. I just wanted to mention that I've noticed that some of our cool season grasses are they're setting flowers, they're setting their inflorescence, they're going to seed. And so grasses like perennial ryegrass in particular get very stalky. There's a stalkiness to them that you might notice when you mow. The mowing quality isn't as good as you're used to. It's just those grasses going to seed. They're stalky right now. Keep your mower blades sharp, and that shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's just something that happens on an annual basis. The second thing I wanted to mention is the Ohio Sports Field Management Association are having a workshop June 27th. It's coming up in three and a half weeks. It's at OSU Athletics. It's going to be a great conference, education in the morning, a tour of the OSU athletic facilities in the afternoon. The Ohio Turfgrass Foundation is advertising that on social media. We'll be sending some stuff out also, but look forward to seeing you all at that conference. Several of our faculty will be speaking at that. And as I said, we'll be at OSU Athletics. So mark your calendars for June 27th for the OSFMA spring workshop. That's all I've got, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. All right. With a pretty hot topic at the moment, Mr. Ganobcik, what we got? Unmute yourself, sir. All right.
There we go.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think a lot of people have been paying attention to this new toy that we got. We tried it out in the fall and did some testing and wanted to see whether or not it would function for us. Our triplex was 16 years old and needed replacing. Basically, we try to consider a lot of factors. So the piece of equipment that we wound up going with that kind of was currently ready on the market when we needed something was the Husqvarna Sierra. It's robotic mower, and it's got basically it's got 3 rotary decks, and each of the decks underneath has 5 blades on it. So we're dealing with we're mowing with 15 blades on there. It does a pass that's probably about, I don't know, maybe 28 inches wide or so, maybe 26 inches wide. I don't know, just watching it go by me here right now. So basically with the blades, just in terms of use with the blades and maintenance, the middle blade, the middle deck rather, it spins opposite directions every time that it goes out. And so both sides of the blades are sharp. So it uses the opposite side of the blade each time that it goes out and mows. Now the left and the right deck, they spin opposite directions of each other. So essentially every 7 days, we'll swap the left deck and the right deck so that the opposite side of the blade gets used. And then the other 7 days, so basically every 14 days. So we're getting 14 days total out of a set of blades. So basically every Tuesday morning, either blades get changed or the decks get swapped. One thing that I really like about it is I do 100% full control from my phone. So I can do it from home. I can do it from other side of the world or, whatever. I've got full control from my phone. Caveat is that the machine is happy and that it's docked properly and that there's no malfunctions. So obviously if there's any kind of a malfunction, then I need to reset it and get everything going. So, we're still working through a lot of bugs. It's still a very new piece of equipment, very new piece of technology. So people that know me know I'm pretty, not only stubborn and outspoken, but also that I like to push the envelope for every piece of equipment or every piece of technology that I can get my hands on. So Basically, we're going through Otmo. It's a distributor, and they've got a local office. I think they're actually based locally here in Westerville, but I think they're a national company. Without their support, I would not have got the equipment. I would have not got this robot mower because I wasn't getting the support. Basically, the conversations that I had with Husqvarna, there's no way that I was going to get the support that I needed, especially for a very new piece of equipment, a very new piece of technology. So we're definitely still overcoming some hurdles, still trying to get some software updated and some different things modified. So some of the things, sometimes it likes to maybe skip cleanup passes. Well, that's not okay for us. We need to have 100% of the field mowed every time that we mow. So it can't skip stuff. The GPS is still a little bit loose on it, and so it doesn't mow perfectly straight lines all the time. So trying to work on that. And there's some other things that just trying to work through with Husqvarna and just trying to get things, again, with new technology, trying to get stuff usable and to where I think it's worth it for other people to buy this and to use it. So to me, I know they're already marketing it and trying to get it out there. To me, it's still kind of in test process. I think that it's really close, but we're definitely still trying to overcome some hurdles. Trying to think of some other stuff with it. So we're doing 99% of our mowing with this, with the caveat of basically around bullpens and around the game mound. I can only have it get so close to those tarps. So basically we bring out the walk mower and just do one cleanup pass around the bullpen mounds and one pass around the game mound. Otherwise, the Sierra is doing 100% of our mowing out here. So, one of the big questions that people always ask is how long does it take? How does it do with a charge? So a full charge for this guy will do about 6 hours worth of mowing, probably a little bit more, but about 6 hours for the outfield. So I can break this down. I can break the field down any way that I want to. I can go out and create as many programs as I want. I can have it mow whichever direction I want. So basically I've got a couple programs for the outfield, a couple programs for the infield, a couple programs for foul territory, and then some other ones that like if the tarp's on the field to not mow through the tarp, and some other, if we're aerifying, I've got the field broken into sections to go around that and stuff like that. So to do the outfield is about 4 hours and 15 minutes, give or take, depending on which direction that I've got it going and how many turns it's got, and if it's got to get in little nicks and crannies, or, if it can go straight through. But it's about 4 hours and 15 minutes to do the outfield. So basically, it doesn't like dew. It doesn't like, I know it's marketed to be able to mow through wet grass and dewy grass, and it can, but it's going to leave clumps everywhere. So, we learned that the hard way. Come in one day after a dewy mow, and there's just clumps of grass everywhere. It just looked like the outfield threw up. So, we've learned to try to always mow when the grass is pretty wet. So basically, as soon as the game's done, when the team's home, as soon as the game's done, I send it out to start mowing the outfield and try to get the outfield done before dew sets in overnight. When the team's on the road, I'll usually do it. I know it's not optimal for health of the plant, but I'll typically do it kind of late afternoon or early evening. Just again, trying to use dry plant time and, make sure we're not creating a big mess out here. Then on game days, we'll mow infield and foul in the morning as soon as the dew dries up and we can get it out there. Basically, as soon as the dirt gets dry enough for this to go on the edges and not leave ruts for us, because obviously we're professional baseball, and so I flood the dirt every night, and so it's soaked overnight. That's why we can't do that overnight. So infield takes about 30 to 35 minutes. Foul territory takes about an hour and 15 minutes, again, depending on which direction I have it go. So
Sweet.
those
So
are some of
Wes,
the big key components.
we have a question. In the
Okay.
stadium, under the buildings, do you notice any issues as far as accuracy?
So that's another good question, and that's something that we're trying to overcome with Husqvarna, is to be able to get a repeater set up for the GPS unit. So we've got a GPS unit. So obviously professional baseball has introduced all this big camera system with, you know, through Hawkeye and stuff for the automated umpiring and stuff like that. So out in the outfield, just beyond the center field wall, we've got a GPS unit set up for this, and that's what talks to the machine as well as to the charging station, and that triangulates and it tells it where to mow. So sorry to be a long answer. It's just, I'm trying to give the full answer. Basically, when the team's on the road, I can leave the charging station outside and not move it unless we've got an event that it's in the way. Then I'll take it inside. Unfortunately, on game days, I have to bring it inside every day. I usually let it get charged back up and then bring it in during batting practice. And then, like I said, I have to take it right back out after the game as soon as the game's done, reprogram where the charging station is, and then I'll send it out to mow. So what we're trying to overcome is that GPS communication issue so that I can permanently leave the charging station inside our shop. And that way we don't have to move it every day. We don't have those kind of issues, and it's just one permanent location.
Good.
In terms of
anyone else got any questions for Wes? That's a pretty comprehensive introduction to your autonomous mower, Wes.
Wes, can you spin your camera around so we can take a look? Some people may never have seen one.
Yep. So in the outfield, we're cutting at 21 millimeter height of cut. The infield is 26 millimeters, and foul territory, I'm kind of varying between 28 and 30 millimeters. It just gets so much wear and tear in foul territory. So I try to let that be tall. It's kind of out of play. So I let that kind of grow up a little bit taller and be a little bit healthier. But right now we're mowing daily, either at 21 or 22 millimeters. Let's see.
There it is.
All right. And no one died and no one missed work because they were drinking beer the night before. All right, Wes. Tyler, have you got a question for him?
No, I was just going to mention we saw the mower in action the other day when we were walking to lower.com field for a soccer game.
All right.
So
wasn't complaining about late hours, right, either.
No.
Wes, thank you so much. And I'm sure we're going to have some questions, so we'll forward them to you. But really appreciate the insight and time. It's great having you on. All right, next up, Tyler Carr.
Well, if you look outside, you starting to see some droughty grass. Drought stress is set in. Most of our state, if you look at the U.S. Drought Monitor, is under abnormally dry conditions. Over, I'd say, the last month, we've been in a deficit of rainfall by about a little over 2 inches in most of the state. And so right now we're seeing really Kentucky bluegrass going into early dormancy. Some tall fescue is lagging behind, but Kentucky bluegrasses were the first to go. And the last couple of weeks and moving forward for the next week or so, we're going to have really high evapotranspiration rates. So this is going to continue. If you have the means to irrigate, or if you want to irrigate, now's the time to do it. We typically will recommend you do that in the early morning hours. So at or near sunrise. This will allow that water to infiltrate into the soil, reducing some evaporative loss. If you irrigate in the evening, the leaves will be wet for longer, could increase disease susceptibility. And if you irrigate during the middle of the day, a lot of that water will be lost to evaporation. Another thing that we can do is limit our mowing. Mowing's a stress, just like drought stress is. And by repeatedly mowing those plants, we're going to stress the plant more. At the bare minimum, raise your mowing height to allow for some of that soil moisture loss to be reduced. But I think it's not really time to freak out about drought stress, at least yet. You look at the outlooks for the next, I would say 2 weeks from now. We're expecting below average temperatures at normal rainfall. And really all we need is a good long rainfall event to mitigate a lot of this. And these grasses will bounce back pretty quickly. So hopefully the outlooks are accurate. But it's okay if your grass is going dormant. Our grasses are made to withstand things like this and bounce back over time. And I know Dave Gardner will be talking a little bit more about other things we can do in drought during this drought stress period, including herbicide control.
All right, Dr. Carr, thank you. On that note, with the opening, Dr. Gardner.
Good morning, everybody. Let me go ahead and share a screen. All right. So last week I threw up this visual and, talked about, cool season grasses have bulliform cells in their leaves, and that's what causes them to curl up. And everybody's like, yeah, we don't care about your nerd nonsense, Gardner. What we care about is that our grass looks like this, right? Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why it looks like this, but the real issue is it looks like this. And so as Tyler was talking about, you may be tempted to irrigate. And this first sentence here kind of repeats what Tyler just said, or irrigate in the early morning if possible. But I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant about, because I know that there's an increasing number of homeowners that watch this segment. One of the challenges that especially homeowners face is that most of the sprinklers that they have available to them, oscillating sprinklers that you would hook to a garden hose and et cetera, deliver the water at a far faster rate than what our soils are actually capable of taking up. And so if you have a standard residential lawn where they scrape the topsoil off and put your sod on the clay subsoil base, the infiltration rate is about 1/10 of an inch per hour. And so when you put out your sprinkler and you put out your rain gauge and you run it for an hour and your rain gauge says that you dropped an inch of water on that plot, well, the soil actually probably took up 1/10 of an inch of that or less. And the rest of it is either sitting there or it ran off to, like that big crack between the edge of the lawn and the sidewalk. Okay. So that's why, you can irrigate for an hour and then you can put your pocket knife into the turf and it's powder dry an inch down. So one of the challenges that you have is delivering the water in such a way that you match up the infiltration rate of the soil. This is one of the reasons why you hear people say that there's nothing that beats a good rain. Most of the time when it rains, unless it's a thunderstorm, we're getting less than 1/10 of an inch per hour. And so, the water is being delivered at a rate that the soil can take it up. But when you try to artificially irrigate turf, that's one of the problems that you have, is that you're applying more than the soil can take up. I don't have a solution to that, but at least you're aware that it's a problem. Okay. So, like if you've ever wondered, why is it that rain is so much more effective than my sprinkler? And why is it that I irrigated for an hour and the rain gauge says that I put down an inch, but the soil still seems dry? It's all about the infiltration rate. Okay. And so at least the issue. Now, as it is getting dry and people are starting to mow less, one of the things that you might see is this little guy right here. This is called American burnweed, which normally we don't have a problem with in turf because it does not survive repeated mowing. But when the grass goes dry and we stop mowing so much, that's when you start to see more of this, okay? And so you could use a herbicide on this, or you could attempt to maintain your mowing schedule. But again, we generally recommend that you cut back on the mowing when conditions are dry like this, because mowing is a stress, right? And taller grass tends to be better able to handle dry conditions. You could also attempt, to use a herbicide, but, one of the issues with herbicides, broadleaf herbicides in particular, is that if you look at the labels for those, They mostly recommend that you apply those products to actively growing weeds, that are green and in good condition. Well, as things continue to dry out, the grass is drying out, the weeds are too. So, my point is that herbicides become less effective in these kind of conditions. Your weed control tends to be a little bit less, and you can also increase the injury to the turf grass since it's already stressed. I guess another way of saying it is that our broadleaf herbicides become less selective in dry conditions. Yes, you can still use them, but you will maybe get a little bit more injury depending on the product and the circumstances at application, and you may get a little bit less control, okay? That said, if you are still using broadleaf herbicides, don't use them maybe on this plant here, white clover, right? It's in bloom right now. And, if you're one of those people that's trying to protect the pollinators, remember that, we talked a little bit earlier about no mow May, and I made the sarcastic comment that, well, in May, it's not like clover is blooming. Well, now it is, okay? So if you are trying to protect the pollinators and you have a bunch of clover that's in bloom, now's not the greatest time to attempt that control if in fact your goal is to protect bees and other pollinators. All right, Ed, that's what I have for this week.
Dr. Gardner, impeccable as always. That is interesting, and I think from the clover standpoint of blooming, there was clover blooming in Cleveland, so it's probably statewide. That's kind of an interesting timing component, that maybe this is something that does fit into a statewide idea. That, with No More May, we saw the dandelions were blooming and going through the bloom in Dayton, when Cleveland, they were basically only putting the flowers or the inflorescence up at that stage. So timings were out.
Well, I mean, I think it's unfortunate and ironic that, it's called No Mow May because, now we're telling people maybe don't mow. And it's like, well, the clover's in bloom. And so it's like the conditions are ideal. If that's your goal, is to, have blooming clover and, save the bees and all of that. It's like now's the time to, let that go. Whereas May, there wasn't a lot of clover in bloom, and, letting the grass grow up, all you're doing is stressing it out. So especially if anybody harvested their grass last week and knocked it back down to 3 inches after No Mow May, now it's dry. And, those plots of turf are probably going to suffer quite a bit.
Well, that's part of our research trial and what we're looking at.
Yes.
Dr. Shetlar, pestilence and insects.
Well, you were talking about the rainfall and historic rainfall and so forth, and I'm friends with a Penn State meteorologist here because I went to Penn State, so we have plenty to talk about. But Ben Gelber had pointed out in a tweet this week that compared to the last 3 years, we look at average rainfall, which is like a 20-year average, but for the last 3 years, Central Ohio is 6 inches down from what we've had at this time for the last 3 years. You remember, for those of you that were in Central Ohio last year, we had a 3-inch rainfall event over a 2-day period here or back in late May. And so things were really wet, really damp. I think it was one of the reasons why the white grubs didn't survive very well, because most of our annual species of white grubs are in the pupal stage. And if those pupal cells in the soil get saturated for about 36 to 48 hours, the pupae literally drown. They're probably not really drowned. They suffocate. They can't get enough oxygen to survive. So we're having perfect conditions for white grub pupae to survive. So while the general white grub population is low, this may be one of the years that they really start a major recovery. So I'm a little worried and concerned about that. Again, I'm not a good prognosticator. I'll tell you how it went in September and October when we actually see the results of the grub population. What I am more worried about is that right now is the prime time for the bluegrass billbug larvae to have reached the crown of plants. And the problem is that when we have what are the normal conditions, those plants are tillering. We cut the seed head stems off, and the plant goes, well, okay, if you won't let me have sex or sexual reproduction, I'll go to asexual reproduction, and they'll tiller. And those tillers in moist soil can establish a root system. And so while the billbug damage is there, you don't see it because the new tillers mask the damage that was to the parent plant. But with those dry conditions, those tillers are going to collapse. If that crown is killed and they can't establish a root system, they're going to collapse. And so billbug damage is exacerbated by this dry condition. So again, don't just drive by, especially the lawn care, don't drive by the lawns and say, it's just going dormant. I really recommend stop your truck, get out there and do that tug test, pull on some of those stems, see if those stems break off and look where they broke. If they're filled with a sawdust-like material, you've got billbugs. Now, what can you do with it? Not much, because the damage has already been done. We warned you about a preventive for billbugs 3 or 4 weeks ago. So now if you didn't do that, you're reaping the damage from that. But you can recommend to your homeowner, get the hose out, get the water to it, get a low volume sprinkler out there, as Dave said, so that you can slowly get that grass growing and maybe save some of those tillers that haven't established a good root system yet. The other thing, it's been kind of a tradition that chinch bugs supposedly like dry weather. In our research that we did here, that's not necessarily true. Chinch bugs do better when their host plant, primarily Kentucky bluegrass, growing. And so it's in what I'm a little bit worried about with this warm weather, the chinch bugs are developing very, very rapidly. So if you're in irrigated lawns, in those irrigated neighborhoods, chinch bugs can be a real problem this year with the warm weather and if the turf is still actively growing. So the last thing for the golf course superintendents, if you haven't gotten your diamide insecticide down, things like Celiprin or Tetrino, we're in a prime conditions for the native caterpillars to attack turfgrass. The little sod webworm, the first generation of sod webworms are just now beginning to emerge. They're going to be dropping eggs into the turfgrass on your greens and tees. Those little larvae then are going to develop, and late June, early July, you'll see these little brown crescent marks from those sod webworms on the greens and tees. So if you've used one of the diamides, that should keep you clean for the next couple of months. But if you haven't used a diamide, if you've only used like a neonicotinoid that doesn't control caterpillars very well, you may be, watch for the bird activity. That's usually a good sign that you've got some caterpillars out there, and you might need to make a quick pyrethroid application to knock out any summer caterpillars. Okay, that's my gloom and doom for the bug world at this time. Hopefully I'll be able to give you a better update on what the grub population looks like as the mass chafers and the Japanese beetles emerge here in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, Dave, between you and Dr. Gardner, it was really depressing. Thank you. Couple of things that didn't get mentioned. I think rough bluegrass is something that we were going to talk about. To Dr. Gardner, I don't know if you mentioned, I wasn't paying attention.
Well, it occurred to me, it's like, wait, I need something to talk about next Friday.
Well, just a heads up, if something starts to go yellow that was apple green and looked all beautiful and the conditions are not really conducive for disease development, then it might be rough bluegrass. Dr. Gardner will do a more comprehensive review of that next week. We are wrapping up No More May today, so you'll probably see some images of us cleaning out some of the plots. From a disease standpoint, while it is hot, it's also extremely dry. So most of the pathogens don't really like those types of conditions. The one thing that you do need to be watching, however, is the soil temperatures are starting to creep up there. And so some of those soil-borne pathogens may start to become of a concern. However, with the forecasts pending, the reduction in temperatures may get us out of some potential issues there. On the screen right now, we've got the various entities that we've got going on for connections. So Turf Team Time is going to be on here on the YouTube video. It'll be on podcast if Dr. Carr will go back. And then we have got the Twitter handles. And as a tease, we got the new website coming online in about 2 weeks' time, with a whole host of information and stuff that you can use to spend hours and hours on your lawn. With that, I say thank you. We will talk to you all next week.